Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
So thank you so much to the both of you. I have two guests today. I have Emilia's mom and dad. And I'm just excited to be able to talk to both of you about your amazing little girl. So what I want to start out with is I got an email from Brian just telling me all about their daughter. And he came with the most amazing picture. It was a picture for on her birthday. It was all pink. It was balloons, this beautiful white background. It was the most stunning picture I have received from any parent. And I've received many, many pictures now. And I just learned that you did it yourselves. I can't believe it. I was so unbelievably impressed. So all of you have to look. I will put this on Instagram. I will put it on my website. I'll actually make sure it's on Facebook. So you guys got to go look at this amazing picture done by Emilia's mom. So you talk about that a little bit first. We're talking about the picture.
Okay. Yeah, I'm super proud of it. We had a little mini photo shoot for her birthday. It's actually the day before her birthday. And we got our little cake because it's COVID and everything. I couldn't hire a photographer to come in and take pictures of her, especially since she was a high-risk kid. So I kind of, for the first time in my life, did a little DIY. I got a nice little background, a little backdrop, and I had a friend make a little balloon arch, and we got a beautiful cake, and we got some nice photos from a bunch of different angles and we've got so many different smiles. That's just one of like Emilia and Marcy.
Yeah. We've got pictures of her stuff in her face. And yeah. Unfortunately, you don't see the aftermath. She actually
gets an allergic reaction to the buttercream.
Egg whites. She got allergic. And so about 20 minutes after those photos, she's got little red patches on her face. She's
getting blotches. So we actually only took photos for about 15-20 minutes. Then we noticed she was breaking out, so that was the end of that.
But we got some beautiful photos. And
you did get beautiful photos, so a little bit of hives, I guess, was worth the beautiful photos, as long as it didn't end up getting too severe. So
no, she was totally fine.
Yep, she was good. I think she enjoyed the sprinkles, and
she certainly looked like she was enjoying herself in the pictures anyway. It was amazing.
She was, even though we kept having to put her back in her spot.
But. Yeah. That was one of the earlier photos because, of course, she destroyed the cake. So.
Oh, all right. Well, why don't you start out now by just telling us all about your amazing little girl?
She was definitely very amazing. I guess we can kind of start with, we wanted her for a long, long time. And when we got pregnant with her, we were very happy. We had just bought a house because we kind of got tired of waiting to get pregnant. So we thought, let's buy a house. And then about a week later, we found out we were pregnant with her.
Wow.
Which we probably would have held off on something.
The house. Definitely would have been the house.
Yeah. But she was absolutely great. I started reading to her right away, Lord of the Rings, and I wanted her to have the nerd culture right from the very beginning. Uh-huh. And pregnancy was good. No problems. All of the ultrasounds came back with no problem at all. We found out we were having a girl, and we knew her name right away. And we actually went to go get induced, and Emilia came so quickly. We got
5 hours, 4 hours,
a 5-hour labor. But and we had kind of a plan going in that we would, epidural, and we would,
you have your perfect like baby plan. They give you like this outline and you fill out your birth plan, and just everything did not go as planned.
I know.
So
I actually, to be honest with you, I always hated the birth plan. The moms that came in with a birth plan, I like, this is destined to go wrong.
Totally.
Because that's when I was in residency, I would be involved in the delivery process, and they come in, and anyway, it was always like, it's going to not go well. You're almost better off winging it.
Yes.
So right away when Emilia was born, she was looking blue. And so, when they're supposed to put the baby right onto mom's chest and, dad's supposed to cut the cord, we didn't have any of that because the doctors and nurses recognized that there was an issue right away, whisked her away to put her on oxygen. And I kind of we had talked about having a plan ahead of time that if anything should happen, wild theories, if anything happens, I have to chase the baby. And Claudia's mom would stay with her. And we never thought it would happen, but that's what ended up happening.
I prepare for the worst.
So I followed Emilia to the NICU where she was on oxygen and started getting all of her tests. And the pediatrician who was on call that day ended up being her pediatrician after the fact. Absolutely amazing doctor in Guelph who has dealt with a lot of cases that were similar to Emilia's. She was born with a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which was diagnosed, from a chest X-ray after she was born, but wasn't picked up in any of the ultrasounds. And so right away we were told, that we're going to go to one hospital. They didn't have room. So we were told we were going to go to another hospital and ended up at Sick Kids. And at Sick Kids, they, did some more tests, also found out she had a heart defect or a couple of heart defects as well. And she was there for the first 2 months of her life.
2.5, 3, I think.
Yeah, 2.5 or 3 months, where, some of her family got to come and meet her. And we went home for 6 days, came right back to the hospital. So we had a bit of a rocky start, but eventually we left the hospital. She had a nasogastric tube to help her eat because she was aspirating on her milk. And we kind of locked ourselves away for COVID as soon as we got home. So, everyone hands off and
Yeah, so I'm just going to back up just a little bit and explain to people what a diaphragmatic hernia is. So interesting that you say this, because when I was pregnant with my oldest, I was taking care of a couple of different kids that had congenital diaphragmatic hernias in the NICU. And so when I went in to go do my prenatal ultrasound, when they're saying, oh, the 4-chamber heart, and do you want to know if it's a boy or a girl and all of that, I asked, is the diaphragm intact?
Yeah.
And the ultrasonographer said back to me, what are you? Because I'm a pediatrician who's currently taking care of 2 kids with diaphragmatic hernias. So anyway, it was fine in my daughter's case, but I just felt my anxiety just kept going up because I was like, they're not saying anything about the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the muscle. Everyone maybe heard of your diaphragm because it helps you breathe, but it is the muscle that separates your chest cavity where your lungs are with your abdominal cavity where all your intestines are. So if you have a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, that means that diaphragm is not fully intact, holding all your intestines down. So the intestines tend to kind of float up into the chest cavity because it seems to kind of have room, right? So now your lungs, instead of growing beautifully, what a fetus does is breathe in and out amniotic fluid. But when the intestines are stuck up there, then those lungs aren't working properly and breathing the amniotic fluid like they should. And so they cannot develop properly. So you end up with really severely malformed lungs, at least on the one side, is usually quite bad. And so then when you're born, you're having to live basically off of kind of one lung, if that, because the heart can be shifted. There are going to be all sorts of complications. And I remember when I was in my training, which is now 20 years ago, I'm dating myself, it had about a 50% survival rate. So we used to tell parents when they were born that your child has a 50% chance of getting making it out of the NICU. I am not sure what that number is now because I don't do neonatology, but just to kind of give a little bit of background as to what that means, just for the average listener, because they're not going to know. So,
Yeah,
and
we've
what
had
were
quite
the
the
numbers
crash
given
course.
to you?
Oh,
Do you know?
I can't even remember. Honestly, I don't know if they gave us numbers.
I know
because-
that the 50% number was still given, but I think that was given as kind of a low estimate, kind of
Yeah.
to get us prepared for the worst. But Emilia made it out. And what you were saying with, the breathing problems, that's what was causing her to have trouble eating. She was breathing a little harder. And, that was her struggle all through her life, was, the feeding problems that ultimately came from the CDH. So, we came home with an NG tube, and we
started feeding her solid foods at 4 months old when she could hold her head up.
Wow.
Which sounds crazy, but I swear it was what our doctors told us to do.
She had so many feeding therapists and physical therapists, and we were shocked when they said, start with purees. And, Emilia hated purees.
Yeah, she didn't like it.
She absolutely hated them. But when we started feeding her, more real food like bananas, even mashed up bananas, she couldn't stand them. But if I gave her a full banana, she was so good at taking a little tiny bite and eating it, no problem. And we could tell that she loved playing with her food, loved eating her food. And that, after the NG tube, she got a G tube put in. And that changed her life completely, because she went from not being able to, lift herself up. And all of a sudden, once the irritation of the NG tube through her throat was gone, she was rolling over, sitting up.
She was like babbling.
That's
when
immediately.
She started saying mama and dada all of a sudden once we got that tube out.
Yeah, when she came out of her surgery, only one person was allowed in the hospital at a time. And Claudia was there with her, and they took out the NG tube, and immediately Emilia started babbling. We have a video of it, and she's just testing out her vocal cords. Mem, 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 mem,
Yep.
mem.
It's really sweet.
So she just took off after her G tube, and that was in September.
And then she became a tubie that was a foodie. She was a tubie who was a foodie. It was great.
I thought it would be hilarious to give her first steak.
Okay, we didn't do this way back then, though. You're jumping
No,
ahead.
no.
Okay, we didn't go from purees to steak.
No, she had teeth by this point. But I thought it would be great if we gave her first steak as the best cut of steak we could find. So we found this wagyu, perfectly marbled. Claudia cooked it up. It was rare. It's so good. It's something that we treat ourselves to. And it was Emilia's very first piece of steak, and she loved it.
She loved it.
We gave her, we always gave her a little bit of our food. And the next week or 2 weeks later, we had another steak, not the best. And Emilia chewed it up and spat it right out.
Only time she ever spat anything out. And it was like a good steak. It wasn't a bad steak.
Yeah.
It was a nice ribeye.
But
you just spoiled her. You gave her the best too quickly.
We were trying to do that. So the kid deserved to be spoiled.
Yeah,
That's right.
We tried all kinds of foods with her, and she was a total foodie. Like, I was feeding her full peanut butter and jam sandwiches. We gave her octopus for Easter. And
I'm Portuguese. It's a thing, okay?
Okay.
But she ate all of hers and some of mine. She was
French fries.
French fries were her favorite.
Yeah.
What little kid doesn't love French fries? But her absolute favorite.
Blueberries.
So we always tried to spoil her, because it was anything that she could eat, and she was doing so well. I gave her the spiciest chana masala just a week before we ended up going into the hospital.
3 days before.
And it was in our fridge. It was too spicy for Claudia. is too spicy for her mama. But Emilia took a bite and immediately had her mouth open for more. You know, one of her favorite dishes we always went back to was like asparagus with
No, not asparagus, broccoli.
Oh,
She
broccoli.
hated asparagus.
It was garlic with a side of salmon.
Yep.
It was just absolutely coated with garlic, and she loved it. So
That's
we
awesome.
had a little foodie on our hands that
Yeah.
had her G-tube, and she got off of it completely. And that's something
Really?
that we're so proud of her for.
Yes, we started weaning her off of her G-tube in January. And
So she was how old then?
1 year.
Just right
1
out of year. Uh-huh.
Yep. She might have been just a little bit under, because her birthday was January 20th. And we started right after Christmas. So she was just under a year. And by the time May came around, she was completely off of it.
And we were scheduled to have it taken out,
Oh, yeah.
which ended up being the day that she passed. We had her
Oh.
scheduled to go into the clinic and speak with her general surgeon because she was off of her G-tube completely.
She was gaining weight, no problems whatsoever. She was getting a nutritious diet, variety of foods.
And she was such a happy girl. She was, you know, she never quite took steps alone, but she
took steps with the
push
walker,
cart.
the push cart my cousin got her.
But she loved to stand up, and she would clap for herself. She would look in the window at her reflection, and she would look to us, and she would stand up and just clap and scream. And she was such a happy girl, and a little mischievous baby. Just, you know, once she finally got off the NG tube and, you know, was crawling less than a month later, you know, she was just around everywhere, unstoppable, learning how to climb stairs and just doing an amazing job. And we were so proud of her. Still are.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
yeah. And
So she was doing really well. I mean, this is in all areas of her health. It seemed like she was doing well, or were there struggles in certain areas?
No, she was finally a normal kid.
Yeah.
Like there were no problems anymore. She just needed the G-tube out.
And you said she had a little something going on with her heart too, right?
Yeah.
She did.
She was born with some congenital heart defects.
They called it Swiss cheese heart, which
holes
you can
everywhere.
imagine what that looks like.
And by the time we left the hospital, you know, at 2 or 3 months old, the sizes of the holes in her ventricular septum had decreased to a size that they weren't worried about doing immediate surgery. And they continued to decrease. And, you know, we had follow-ups with the cardiologist, and it was never at a point that she needed surgery. So she got, if not a clean bill of health, she was, you know, cleared to pretty much do 1 year follow-ups and 2 year follow-ups after that. So her heart never bugged her anymore. The diaphragm was fixed up. The only thing that there was a bit of scar tissue from the G-tube surgery and her diaphragm surgery when she was 4 days old.
So what ended up happening that when everything kind of went downhill?
Well, it was that when she got her G-tube, they went in and they noticed, wow, the G-tube surgery actually took longer than the diaphragm repair.
Oh, that's strange. Yeah.
Yeah, she had a lot of scar tissue, so they had to go in and clean it up. And so she was about 9 months old when we noticed that. And obviously that's odd, and that could cause complications later on, but there's nothing really you can do about it. No. So May rolled around. She was good until May, end of May.
She had just passed 9 kilograms because we were measuring her like every week. So proud of every bit of weight gain she had. And one night after, you know, she had had dinner and, you know, a full bottle of milk on her own, we gave her a bath, went to bed, and, you know, she started puking, have a bit of vomit. and, middle of the night, we didn't immediately rush to the hospital, mainly because she had had spinach soup for dinner. And so there was nothing odd about,
green puke when you've had green soup.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're no strangers to that vomit with, a baby that had reflux most of her life.
Yeah.
So we have a whiteboard in her room that we marked down every little thing. We've got every tooth, every word, every bath night marked on this whiteboard. And so we marked down, that she had a puke, she had a very mild fever, and put her back to bed. And we woke up to a bit of puke. And then she wasn't eating her breakfast. And actually, Claudia got her first dose of the COVID vaccine that morning. So she went and got the vaccine while I was trying to feed Emilia and, give her some cookies and anything that she could stomach. And
you called me while I was at the vaccine center, and he said, yeah, she's really not doing very well. And I said, well, as soon as I come home, we'll just drive straight to Sick Kids.
Yeah.
Might be extreme, but we'll just go straight there.
So, and on our hour and a half drive, we're also emailing her pediatrician to keep her in the loop, and
her surgeons,
everything. And we ended up in the ER where they kept her on antibiotics and just were keeping an eye on her because they assumed that it was
gastroenteritis.
Some sort of infection. So they put her on antibiotics right away. And we waited until they got some imaging done to confirm that it was a bowel obstruction. And so after they confirmed the bowel obstruction, they took her in for a surgery to get rid of the scar tissue that was causing it. And surgery went well.
So just to back up 1 second here, it was caused by the scar tissue. So the scar tissue was impinging her bowel. So they had to go in, and she had a lot of scar tissue. They had to clean it up again. And after that, everything looked fine.
Yeah. So she
was recovering.
We were on the ward that she was actually taken to after she was born. So we were seeing nurses that we knew, and her doctors were checking on us every day. And, we have a Sick Kids family now. All of the nurses and Emilia's medical team is, they're all saints in our books, and they helped us just as much as they helped Emilia. And everything was going fine until, Emilia Emilia still couldn't have any fluids because they didn't want to.
They wanted to let the bowels heal and everything, right?
Right. Give them some bowel rest. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So, and Emilia, poor girl, we would come in with Starbucks drinks. And one of the things she loved to do was take our Starbucks cups and try to drink out of them like us. And so anytime we came in the room,
we didn't give her coffee, PS, just throwing that out there.
Okay.
I mean, pumpkin spice latte, I think, was her favorite to chew on. but
girl after my own heart.
Yeah. Oh, and actually this morning we're eating vanilla bean scones, which were her food, just to jump all the way back to what a great eater she was.
We'd give her this little Starbucks vanilla bean scone, and she would hold out her hands and grab it. She'd go, ooh.
Yeah. So
point is, she really loved food and drink, and she wasn't allowed to have it. Yeah. And the last good day she had, I was with her, and she was doing great. Brian and I were taking things in shifts. I would take the day, Brian would take the night, because only one of us were allowed in there at a time.
Yeah. We got very good at hospital life. We just followed the nurse's example, night and day shift.
Yeah.
And, we had it down pat. And the last good day, Claudia was with her.
She was doing great. They told me that tomorrow we were going to give her fluids. We were going to give her sips of water, and everything looked awesome. And I left around, 8 or 9 p.m. and Brian showed up.
And about 3 hours into me being with Emilia, she was having trouble getting comfortable. The nurses came in and started asking if her extremities were looking a little bit darker. And they told me that she needed to have her catheter put back in. So I called
Okay.
Claudia, and
We had a fight about it because
she was doing so
she was
good.
doing so well. I couldn't understand why her catheter needed to go back in after what they had just told me.
And what we found out after was that, you know, the reason they were putting the catheter back in was because she wasn't peeing on her own, and they wanted to check her urine output. And they got the catheter in, and her kidneys had started to stop working. Started
Started to fail.
Yeah. And then everything just started to hit boom, boom, boom. Just, you know, they came in and told me that she needs to get moved down to the ICU, and she needs to get another a scan done, and just
Another
everything
surgery
started.
to make sure that the bowel wasn't perforated during the surgery. She needed dialysis. She
Yeah.
was going into multi-organ system failure. Like
And this
everything happened in 24 hours.
And it was just out of the blue, from, you know,
Wow.
about to drink water to just downhill. And eventually, you know, I was told to call Claudia, just ask her to come in. And they let both of us into the hospital with special permission, because COVID was only one parent or guardian, that's it. And after Emilia came, after Claudia came, sorry, they told us that the situation was dire, and that we should prepare for the worst. And that was it. They were doing everything that they could.
Yeah.
And
They suspected an infection of some sort,
and then,
obviously.
yeah, that it was consistent with sepsis, and that they were doing everything they could. They put her on, you know, broad spectrum antibiotics and everything they could.
She was very heavily sedated, and we went in with the doctors after they had been trying to give her dialysis for 5 hours because they were having trouble getting it in. And apparently it was touch and go, and we were just kind of waiting in a room off to the side. They weren't sure Emilia was going to make it at that point. And then when they thought she was a little more stable, they let us in. And as we were talking over her, I bent over and my hair kind of grazed her cheek. All of a sudden she opened up her eyes, which they were shocked. The doctor said she'd never forget it.
Yeah. Because
she's never seen a kid that sick open up her eyes for her parents. And we sang to her. She had a little aquarium toy that we had brought from home that she always fell asleep to. And in the middle of the night, sometimes we would hear on the monitor just a slap, and her toy would turn on. So we played her aquarium. We put, you know, the stuffed animal that, you know, I got her when she was born, and Claudia got her one when it was Easter. So she had her bunny and her bear.
And we both sang, you know, some of the songs that we would sing to her, and, you know, put her to sleep. And then they sedated her a bit more.
We told them to knock her out entirely, because she was so covered in tubes. If she had the ability to, if she wasn't basically paralyzed by the drugs they were giving her, she would have been tugging everything out. So we said to knock her out. She was obviously in pain. And then, so her last memory is us putting her to bed.
Yeah.
And I was told to kind of go hide away in a little room that parents get to go sleep. And I could not sleep.
I mean, I stayed with her, and I was only there it was only an hour.
Only an hour.
And then she was obviously, her blood pressure was going down. They kept pushing fluids, but she obviously was very swollen, and just everything was going wrong. And she went into cardiac arrest, and I was told to call Brian. And he came running into the room.
I ran back through the halls, and when I got there, you know, they were doing CPR, and we didn't leave the room. And eventually we were told to sit down and
just hold her.
The doctor came, said there's nothing more they can do, and just to hold her. So we held her, and that was it.
Passed.
Yeah. And yeah, we've just been dealing with everything after the fact. I was in complete shock. You
were catatonic.
I was useless. Like from the moment everything happened, you know, I was useless. Claudia made every single phone call, And like, I don't know how she powered through, because I barely remember walking out of the hospital. Like,
Yeah.
and at the time we also signed the autopsy, permission.
Yeah, when we were trying to leave the ICU doctor, we call her boss lady because she's a total boss.
Yeah. She was Emilia's first ICU doctor, and she was the one treating her at the very end as well.
And she was kind of telling us, I think maybe you should do an autopsy.
And it was suspicious that it happened so close after a surgery. And
they had gone in that morning to make sure that there were no perforations, right? And they couldn't find anything. So it was really suspicious. It was really strange. And we signed the autopsy.
Which we
permission.
just got the results for last week. We had to reschedule the interview with you.
Yeah. The interview was supposed to be exactly 1 week ago, and then they scheduled the autopsy for the exact same time, or the autopsy report to be given to you for the exact same time.
So a couple of things have happened, since she died, because we had been preparing to do genetic testing because it was offered to us, and we thought we could handle it at the time after Emilia was doing so well. And we kept the genetics appointment and had genetic testing done. And we got those results a couple of weeks ago and found out that Emilia had a syndrome.
A very rare, newly defined syndrome.
And that's cardiac urogenital syndrome. Okay. So it's, we got the rundown of, the exact genetics that cause it, but it was a de novo mutation. It did not come.
So it's brand new mutation. Mm-hmm.
And there's been so few cases reported. I think
19. She's the 19th case reported worldwide. Keeping in mind that obviously the technology to detect this kind of thing has only been around for like 5 years. But there are three main aspects to this syndrome. The first is the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So check. The second is the heart defects. So check.
And then the other part of that is the urogenital side, which we had never noticed anything because she was a girl. It's less common to notice on a girl. And in the autopsy, we found out that she did have some malformation
of her uterus and vagina.
Yeah.
So check.
Yeah. So she was, kind of this case of cardiac urogenital syndrome. And it doesn't change anything that happened. It was still, the
treatment.
CDH.
The treatment process would have been the same. Yeah. Nothing would have changed had we known.
The scar tissue still caused an obstruction, which caused her to,
And she obviously needed the surgeries for the G-tube and the CDH repair. So, there was nothing we could do about any of that.
Yeah. And then the autopsy, in addition to telling us that they could confirm some of the malformation, they also kind of told us that they still think that it's sepsis, but they couldn't find any evidence of bacteria because the antibiotics had done their job. Right. They had removed all of the bacteria, but everything still looked like sepsis, multi-system organ failure. And that the bacteria probably came from her own bowel. Just with the inflammation, it probably translocated from her bowel into the bloodstream and started to shut down her organs.
So there was something we could do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just again and again and again, just kind of that repeating, but you couldn't have done anything. You couldn't have done anything.
Which I think is helpful because we're very good at the blame game.
Yep.
Especially me. I've got that guilt thing down packed. So
and we've talked about that. we've talked about that on the podcast before about how Gwen has brought this up, that someone that she worked with had said that it's so much easier for people to feel guilt than to feel powerless. And I think that's what you're really describing here, is that it's so hard when you feel like you were completely powerless. There was nothing you could do because you always second guess and feel like, but I could have done something. There had to have been something that I could have done. But when the answer again and again and again is you were just completely powerless and there was never anything you could have done, it's hard to accept. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
really
mean, it's
is.
good news because it's not like you have to now, you shouldn't be, don't should yourself either. That's another saying we have here is don't should yourself, say you should do things. But even though you shouldn't be feeling the guilt, so it's nice that it's at least not valid guilt, but that's about all you can do, really, right?
Yeah.
But nothing is worse than what's happened, and we've now been dealing with those would have, should have, and everything else that's come with losing Emilia. And we've tried to keep ourselves going, and we started going on walks with her, and every morning we were going on walks. We've kept that going. Emilia, one of the few words she knew how to say was go. And it was one of the few times that she picked it up completely out of the blue. I had her on my shoulders running around, and I would say, let's go. And she would, run with me. And all of a sudden, as I was doing that one morning before our walk, I just hear a little sound from up on my shoulders, go. And she wouldn't stop saying it. And so now, when we go on walks or when we're at the cemetery and, it's time to get back in the car and go, we always, say, let's go. Because that's what Emilia, taught us to do. She taught us to keep going. And, we've been, having the worst year of our lives.
Yeah.
And she, her being here during COVID makes COVID so inconsequential.
I know.
Everyone will remember this as the worst possible time, but we had Emilia through everything.
Like 2020 was the best year of our lives, and 2021, as everything was opening up, was the worst.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to, tell Emilia's story, and we've been making the cemetery a beautiful, bright place for her. And
we just put up we just took down her flowers the other day. She had a bunch of flowers in there, but we're in Canada. It's getting cold. So the flowers were dying. And we've seen
snowflakes here in Michigan. So I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, you're not far. But we put in some little Christmas trees potted, and we decorated it all up. She's got some Christmas lights,
and baubles, and we've got bright spotlights, and it's the brightest place in the cemetery.
It really is. It's also the most colorful in the entire cemetery.
So we've made a beautiful place, and she's
got a nice little bench.
Yeah.
She's got the only pink bench in the whole city.
Yep. Yeah, they discontinued it because no one ordered it. But
but it's beautiful.
Yeah. And, we've tried to tell her story through, making sure that people know that she had beat her G-tube, that she didn't, die because of the issues that she had her whole life. She died because of a complete accident that could have happened to any kid completely out of the blue. This wasn't something that, it was hanging over our heads for months and months. And we've tried to tell that. We also set up a website, runforemelia.ca, when we did a charity run for her, or walk.
A 5K.
To raise money for sick kids and to distract us, all about distraction.
Yeah, right?
And
wanting her remembered.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Hence the walk and the website.
Yeah.
That is just the biggest fear, I think, is feeling like no one will remember. I don't want to be the only one who remembers my Andy, right? You don't want to be the only ones who remember your Emilia. It's just,
And that's really hard too, because I mean, she died at 16 and a half months and her whole life was in COVID.
yeah.
So, like her grandparents only got to hold her once right before COVID. And then her whole life, she's been isolated here with us. So her whole life, it was just us. We didn't get to show her off, you know, we didn't get to take her out to parties and take her out to dinners and show her off to everybody. And we were so damn proud of her. We would have loved to.
And we had so many plans, you know, for once everyone was vaccinated. You know, we were about to, you know, on doctor's recommendation, we would start letting people back in if they were double vaxxed plus 2 weeks. And, you know, they could come and see her, hold her again. And she never quite reached that point.
So going back to that fear of other people not remembering her, like no one else got to be there for all.
They never even knew her. Yeah.
No, sometimes, exactly. Sometimes I say that some people will say something and it'll trigger me and I'll say like, you didn't even know her, which isn't quite fair. We tried very hard to share her with the family. We had video calls and Snapchats. And
video calls were her life. She loved playing with our phones. And I have to tell you, Emilia, only child in the middle of a pandemic where she has not met anybody else, was the best sharer. She shared everything. She would bring us her toys. She would, I would try to feed her and she would feed me right back. And there was a video call with my dad, and Emilia was eating her goldfish and just started trying to push them into the phone. Just trying to, and I told my dad, like, she's trying to feed you. She's trying to share with you. And, you know, even through the computer, like she was so sweet, she
was a perfect kid.
She was amazing, but she loved to share her goldfish and, you know,
but those are the few little memories that people have interacting with her. Like they don't have a lot. And here we go with the guilt thing again. Part of me feels guilty for that. If I had known she was only going to have 16 and a half months, we probably would have been more lenient with our parents seeing her and her aunts and uncles. But because of this pandemic, we kept her all to ourselves. And I feel really guilty about that. But at the same time, we're super blessed.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I think the both for sure.
Yeah.
Because you got to enjoy her so much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Without COVID and without even her health issues, I was able to take way more time off work than I would have had otherwise. So I wouldn't have had nearly as much time with her and we wouldn't have been able to enjoy it. And, you know, COVID was the best time in our lives.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it.
We just hid away in here with our kid and it was great.
It was after everything was opening back up that we can say, you know, everything just became terrible. Everything opened up and we were just, you know, locked away for a different reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, about your grief journeys and how just grieving together and grieving separately, because I know you grieve differently.
Oh, we definitely grieve differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, we've kind of flipped. Brian was super emotional when everything happened, and I was the strong, stoic one. And now it seems like we flipped. Brian's pretty strong and stoic, and now I get very emotional.
Yeah. And I'm sure, you know, anyone who's been through this can kind of understand flip-flopping between, you know, I feel like I have to go and do things constantly, and then all of a sudden, you know, break down and I'm useless again. It's like I'm right back, you know, the day that it happened.
We call it going into the room.
Yeah. And we have such vivid memories of, you know, that room and everything that happened. And so when we get really depressed, that's what our minds go to. But we flip-flopped and we tend to kind of balance off each other. So when I'm breaking down, Claudia is very strong. And when Claudia is breaking down, I try to be strong.
For the most part.
For the most part.
For the most part.
There's been a couple of false
really
starts where
depressing days.
we both end up on the floor. And,
yeah.
But
we've actually done a lot. I think going with what Brian was saying about doing things we have to do. We've maintained her spot at the cemetery. Like we said, it's all decorated and it's beautiful. And we go out to garden centers now and we find cute things. And we even ran away to Portugal for a month.
Yep.
Which,
okay.
Yeah, that sounds a little crazy, but we just couldn't handle being here anymore.
Yeah. And Emilia is actually named after Claudia's great grandmother from Portugal. And we found out that Emilia was going to be a girl, and we decided on the name when we were staying there in 2019. And we kind of felt like, even though Emilia had not been there, she had been there when we were
in utero.
In utero, yes. Mm-hmm.
But we felt such a pull there, and we tried to listen to, I don't know why, but I feel like we're supposed to do this, or I feel like I want to do this. It's what brought us home after Emilia died, and we felt that pull to Portugal. And it was hard to kind of convince ourselves to go until a great friend said, would it be easier? Would it make your decision easier if I said I would go? And 2 days later, we were buying tickets all together to go to Portugal a week after that. And it was a bit of a pilgrimage for us. And we went to the sanctuary of Fatima in Portugal.
Okay.
And staying nearby. So we did a bit of a pilgrimage, and we just relaxed, and we felt like we could breathe in, there, even though Emilia had never been there. We felt like
we felt her. Yeah. We felt her presence, her pull so much more there than we had been over here.
Yeah.
Back home.
We extended our trip, and,
we literally stayed right up until the run. 2 days later, when we got back, we had the 5K that we were telling you about for sick kids.
It's one of the few, we had to come home for that. I've also had, physical pain as well. I've developed really bad sciatica in the last couple of months. And so, I had to come back to have appointments, and, I think we would be running back to Portugal now if we could, because we're not sure we can, do Christmas or any celebrations.
I know.
And
that's so hard. It's so hard, especially, you went through something very similar in some ways. I know she had medical problems throughout, but it was almost as sudden as me losing my auntie in a car accident, right? Because everything was fine. Like, she was kind of sick, but we went and did the surgery, and this is going to kind of fix everything. And we're going to be out of here in a few days. I almost feel like you're back in the hospital, that initial stuff, you were seeing all those people back from the past. It almost was like, just like a little party, almost like, I get to see all these people again, and they get to see how much she's grown, and we're going to just fix this little thing, and then we'll be off again, and we won't really need to see them. And then just disaster, right? Just completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head right there. We've said numerous times that
it never occurred to us that this was going to be the outcome when we went in. We went back for clinic visits, and stopped in on the floor to just say hi, and that's what it felt like. And we've been through the absolute terrible time now, and we've had to deal with things that we never thought we would have to deal with. We've had to come to terms with our own mortality, in our grief journey now, that what 28-year-old has picked out and paid for their cemetery plot.
Yeah.
And
the stone that we're waiting to get put in, we're very excited for it. It already has Brian and my names on it, which weirded out a lot of people when we told them that, but there's an odd comfort in knowing exactly where you'll be, and we're going to be with her. And that brings us comfort.
Yeah, I mean, Eric and I will be right next to Andy. When they got us the one spot, it's interesting because it's in a township cemetery. It's a very beautiful cemetery. It's close to us, but anyone who lives in the township can be buried there for free. So you don't pay for any of it. And so the funeral director said, you live in Cascade Township. There's a very beautiful cemetery. I'll arrange for them to show you the spot they can give you. And the guy, showed us the spot, and he said, and there are three. He didn't just give us one; he gave us three that day, which was beautiful. I mean, it's just so nice to know that I'll be right there next to him.
Yeah,
exactly. And we really looked out. We couldn't deal with that in the aftermath. We were both catatonic at this point, and my parents were saints. They went out and spoke to them, and my mom tried to get us the most beautiful plot, and she succeeded. They were showing her this plot in the center of a bunch of graves, and it was a nice enough plot, nothing wrong with it. But my mom looked over, and there was a tree, and she was like, how do we get over there? How do we get a plot over there? And they said, oh, that's a new row. We haven't started that yet. I think the only way we could do that is if we got two plots
side by side,
two family plots side by side, double plots, I guess they're called.
Yeah.
But they have more room. And so, that day my parents bought the second plot right next to us so that Emilia could have the most beautiful, perfect spot under a tree.
So we're on the edge. We put a bench under the tree, the pink one, and it's just such a beautiful spot. But it's it feels like a second home. That sounds like home. It's so morbid, and people get weirded out. But I feel, in some ways, more at home at the cemetery than I do in my own house, because this is her house. And we're surrounded by, a quiet place that should not be quiet.
Yeah.
But the cemetery is supposed to be quiet, and it's a peaceful kind of quiet. And it's peaceful to know that Emilia is here, and this is where I'm going to be. And, I've come to terms with that. It feels so natural to be there now. It feels like home. And, you don't know unless you know, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry my clock is going off now, but I didn't turn it off. I didn't think about it. But I do love this clock because this was given to me by my family after Andy died. So it sings every hour, unless I usually turn it off before I do an interview, but I didn't.
It came at the perfect time.
Yeah, it did come at the perfect time, actually. I think I like it. Now my computer is asking me if I'm playing music right now because it's sensing there's music going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, they gave me that after Andy died just because of his love of music. So they wanted us to have a little bit of music going through the house. So
that's beautiful.
We've decided certain things that have just felt right, because it's hard to know what a 16-month-old likes and doesn't like.
mm-hmm.
We know what she really didn't like because she was vocal about it. And, she loved playing with bones, and there's things that we knew for sure, but we've had feelings afterwards. Like, there's ladybugs all over the cemetery, and we see bees at the flowers, everything. Fireflies. And we've just come to realize Emilia loves bugs. I don't know how we know this, but she would love bugs. It's not something she ever did, but we know that she would just be fascinated by them.
I do remember one time she was trying to pick up an ant. It was days before we ended up in the hospital, and she was trying to pick up an ant in the backyard, and I freaked and I picked her up, and I was like, no. But your mom also called her Ladybug, and afterwards I realized I called her Little Bug all the time.
Yep. And
we see bugs.
We
think that she's trying to show us some bugs.
Yeah.
Which may sound crazy, but
it doesn't sound crazy to me.
Good.
So there's things that we just have come to realize that Emilia loved and loves these things that, she could never really tell us, but
she would have liked all the flowers. She would have picked them all off. She liked to pick leaves off of trees, and she would laugh at that.
Oh yeah, the flowers, without a doubt. Every time we go to the cemetery, we would say like she would be picking these flowers or trying to eat them, and yeah.
Oh. Well, she
Trying to
just
pick 'em
sounds
up.
like such a joy. Oh, what a
She
beautiful,
was.
amazing girl.
And it's crazy because how much she suffered as a kid, all the pokes and all the tubes, and we had to change her NG tube at home ourselves.
Yeah.
Like it was really difficult. She was put through a lot. She was put through the ringer, and yet she was always happy, which was really
Always rebounded
inspiring.
quickly.
Always rebounded. She never cried for more than 30 seconds. Like she slept through the night.
Oh, immediately. I attribute it to the loud hospital for the first couple months. But when we got her home, and put her in the bassinet in our bedroom, she never slept well. And we just decided one day, she will probably sleep better and will sleep better if she has her own room. We put her in a crib, and she was sleeping through the night, 10 hours, no problem.
I miss the sounds on the baby monitor, because when she did wake up, you would hear a slap followed by her toy singing, the aquarium we were talking about before. It's like a baby Einstein's aquarium thing. And like, I miss those sounds in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting to hear the aquarium.
Or in the morning, I would normally, hop up, get out of bed and go grab Emilia. And she always loved sleeping on her belly. She was face down. And there were times I opened up the door. She kind of groggily looked up at me and just fell right back down.
She was like a teenager.
Yeah.
It was like, she would give us this look like, Mama, Dada, leave me alone. I want 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. She was, once she was up, she was so happy, and, she was such a joy in our life. And it's hard now being here without her. And we've been just accepting every bit of grief help we possibly can. I know, I think almost everyone you've had on that's a sick kid's parent has talked about the wonderful grief coordinator, Lori.
Yeah. I've heard great things about her. I've emailed her a little bit, actually.
Yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah.
I was emailing her today.
And one of the reasons I started listening to your podcast was because of another parent that was on here. And, I started listening.
Right?
Yeah, Dimitra. And this podcast felt like, hearing the stories from the parents in the grief support group. And, that was one of the most helpful things that we found right after, was knowing that we're not the only ones going through this. And, it's still hard to find anyone with, a story that matches ours. Everyone's story is different.
Yes.
But we're all just part of this terrible, terrible club
that no one understands, because a lot of people who haven't been through this have compared, like, I guess everyone tries to
make you feel better.
Well, make you feel better, try to empathize, I guess is the word I'm trying to say. And I don't know how many times like people have told us, oh, I've had a miscarriage before, or something like that. And it's like, that's not the same.
I know.
Like, I understand, totally valid, 100% valid. It's a valid pain. But my daughter was, no. And it's difficult because we hear that a lot. Oh, I know what you're going through. I had a miscarriage. And it's like, my daughter
because a decent percentage of pregnancies do end in miscarriage. It's not a small percentage compared to children who die. I mean, there are a lot more miscarriages in the world than parents who lost living children. It's just, there's no comparison. The numbers are so much different. So, and it's it's hard for people to understand. And I'm with you. Like, that is horrible. I went through miscarriage. It's horrible. It's a terrible thing to go through. But it really wasn't on the same level as losing Andy, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, all grief is extremely valid.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, the reason the Sick Kids support group was so good was because it was all the same realm of grief, but we could not fathom going to a grief support group that is filled with, people who have lost spouses or parents or siblings.
Grandparents, like,
And like, absolutely you grieve, but it's a different realm of grief,
like you expect your grandparents to go one day, your parents,
Right.
when you have a spouse, one of you is going to go first.
Losing a child is so out of the natural order.
Your kid's supposed to outlast you.
Yeah. I mean, I was in a grief support group at my church, and there was a man who's like probably 70, and his mother was in his 90s, and he was there because she had died. And I just thought, I mean, and he was grieving. I mean, it's not like he wasn't grieving, but I couldn't at all relate to it. Not at all. It was just really difficult to feel on the same page as a 70-year-old man who lost his 95-year-old mother. I just can't.
It's about the relating. You said the key word. It's hard to relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know it was sad. And it was sad. I was 21 when I lost my mother when she was 42. And that was obviously the hardest thing I'd ever gone through. And it was terrible. But it's entirely different than what I went through, when I was in my 40s and lost my 14-year-old son. It's just, it's not the same.
No.
Yeah. It's all grief, and there are lots of things that I think we can still learn from each other. I think I learned things when I lost my mother that helped me later on, right? I mean, as opposed to my husband, who was really grieving for the first time. I mean, he lost a grandmother, but nothing really close. So I think in some ways I was a little bit better prepared, but still.
It feels like the grief comes back so often because we always think about, where would Emilia be now, or what would have happened. And we're not just grieving for, the child that we know and love and that's gone right now. It's also, all of the possible things that could have happened. And
the life we were planning together.
Yep.
Like it's all gone.
You're grieving your entire future. Your whole future, your child future is gone. Your future is not even close to the same. And it's sadness every single day. And people do not get that. They don't get that.
No.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you touched on it a little bit ago in saying, you don't want your child forgotten. And I always want Emilia to be spoken about. I want to share her. I want to tell her story continuously. And, we've heard from a couple of parents that this is like one of the things to do. We got tattoos for Emilia.
Oh, I've been wanting to do that. My husband's not on board, but yes.
Do it.
We went out.
I'm a bad influence.
We went out and neither of us had tattoos before, but both of us went out a month after we lost Emilia, and we got her name. I'll show it to you. Her name written on our arms. And we feel like she's written all over us. This is just a little bit of it coming to the surface. And if someone sees the tattoo and asks, who's Emilia, that's putting her name on someone else's lips for the rest of my life. And so I want that to always come out. And then we went back months later. We just got other tattoos of her handprint and footprint. So I have her footprint on the top of my foot, so that she's, I would dance with her. I would hold her hands and she would step on my feet and we would walk and dance together. And so she's standing on my foot and she's walking with me.
And I've got her comfort hand, the hand that she would suck her finger on. I've got that over my heart.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
So we've got, tattoos that are hidden and that mean a lot to us and that she's always with us. And then we have another one that, we want people to see her and recognize, like, we are literally wearing our grief on our sleeve. It is written into our skin on our arm. And, it's just
I
one
love
way
that.
that I really hope, that people never stop asking about her. I will share, we've only shared, a couple of choice stories today, but, she filled our days for 16 and a half months with so much joy, a bit of screaming, like good and bad. You're raising a baby, like there's bound to be some crying, but
not a lot.
not a lot, not a lot.
Yeah.
But she's still with us, and it's hard to think about sharing the story with people that we haven't met yet, because it's one thing the people who knew her and know us now, but 5 years from now, if we're getting a new job, talking to coworkers and they ask, how many kids do you have? And I know that's a big question that keeps popping up. Like, it's a terrible question to ask. And how are we going to tell people about Emilia?
Yeah. I know that question is the worst question. And I had someone say that what you really need to say is tell me about your family. So that is my like mission in life, to get people to stop asking how many kids do you have, and when they're curious, say tell me about your family.
That's way better.
So now you can spread that too. It's like my mission to get that question changed over. So if I can do it just a couple people at a time, that's the way I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing Emilia with us. And what a joy. What a joy. And I love just hearing about her. And the thing that really struck me is when you talked about how COVID was the best time in your life. And it was a beautiful kind of message. So thank you again for sharing. And I wish you as much kind of continued joy as you can have, just remembering, because I love to hear how joyous you sound when you remember.
Yeah, she was perfect. Thanks, Marcy.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.